The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion is one of the most well-received games of all time by critics and gamers alike. Behind this massive commercial and critical success hide very deliberate game design choices that set Oblivion apart from the rest. Let's explore those choices and try to find out what gave Oblivion a divergent design. Arguably the most compelling quality that Oblivion offers is the incredible sense of immersion that the player gets throughout their adventures in Cyrodiil. We're talking about the type of immersion where over 300 hours can be spent on one character without getting bored once. Immersion where a 14-year-old kid who moved to a new city would rather fight in the arena and work for the Dark Brotherhood rather than go outside and talk to real people.
Not that I'm speaking from experience. Yeah, my friend Todd did that. That guy is such a nerd.
This immersive depth can only be accomplished through very specific and deliberate game design choices by the developers. Let's start with the obvious ones. Oblivion is home to one of the biggest and most realistic game worlds ever created, and that was even more true back in 2006. The influx of advancing technology and a new generation of consoles meant that developers had a lot more power to work with, and Bethesda took full advantage. The rolling hills of Cyrodiil were some of the most beautiful gamers had ever seen. The area itself is vast, spanning the equivalent of 16 square miles. That's like 80 times the size of the Vatican. Sorry, Francis. The more powerful technology and a new radiant AI system meant that even NPC behavior would be much more realistic, as they reacted to things situationally. NPCs actually steal food from others if they're hungry and douchey enough. All of these improvements serve to make Oblivion more immersive, but they are less design choices and more the product of advancing technology. I mean, who wouldn't want better graphics, a massive game world, and ninjas? But there are other more subtle and more interesting aspects that draw you into Oblivion. One of the most powerful of these is the decision to let the player choose nearly everything about their character and playstyle. You want to play as a pure mage high elf and wreck kids with magic? We got that. You want to become a melee master ugly ass orc brute? That works. You want to be a sneaky battle mage that may or may not be gender confused? Oh, okay. The point is that you could play Oblivion any way you choose. Magic, melee, stealth, or any combination thereof. You can even decide your character's race, gender, birth sign, class, and even facial features. Which isn't always for the best. I'm glad I'm not immersed in whatever the fuck that was. All of this freedom given to the player merges you with the character you're playing. I'm not playing as some fat plumber or sexy lumberjack.
I am Sarah Durand, the badass dark elf exploring this unknown land and completing quests as I please while traveling from town to town.
Which brings us to the next point. Oblivion gave the player virtually complete freedom in how to progress. There is literally only one quest you have to complete in the game, and that's escaping from prison at the very beginning. After that, the game pretty much says, okay dude, do whatever you goddamn please, and we gladly accept the offer. You can be boring and start the main quest, begin any of the guild quest lines, or just explore the incredibly detailed world. Or stumble about in the darkness because you took too long to get out of the prison, so it was sunset when you got out, and that was cool, but now it's dark and you can't see. That Todd guy sure is bad at this game. Todd. This non-linear gameplay means the story is driven by the will of the player, not the games, giving you more control than any episodic interactive drama graphic adventure video game ever could. Yes, that is actually the genre. This feeling of agency combines with an open world where there is virtually nothing stopping you from starting a certain quest or exploring a certain area. The vast majority of quests have no level requirement, and neither do any areas, so if you want to explore somewhere new, you just go. There's no man at the gate with a funny hat telling you to get lost until you reach an arbitrary level. Because of this, it doesn't feel like a game is telling you to do this or that, but that you are in this amazing world and you want to explore it and complete quests because that's what you like to do. And that world truly is amazing, as Bethesda took painstaking care to create and mold Cyrodiil. But it takes more than pretty scenery and a large map to make an artificial universe come alive. It needs a sense of genuineness and spontaneity, and a deep ocean of lore for players to dive into at their discretion. Of course, Oblivion has all these qualities in spades, but the seemingly random events that occur as you travel across Cyrodiil truly embody the sense of realism that Oblivion creates. The mythic dawn attacks from supposedly friendly citizens, waking up to the inn you were sleeping in being taken over by bandits, and my favorite, finding the corpse of a man on the side of the road with a mysterious note and flower on his body. But all of these examples were triggered by something not so random, a specific player action and a pre-programmed algorithm. But they feel real when you experience them for the first time, and there lies the key. Somehow making a completely artificial universe feel real to the player, and that's what Oblivion accomplished. What those random events did for realism while exploring the game world, Oblivion's in-game lore did for the realistic context of the game world. The wealth of knowledge provided by countless books and conversations throughout Cyrodiil gave us a history and context for the events of Oblivion. Similarly to its contemporaries, the astounding amount of well-written information provided by the game immerses the player even further into this fantasy universe. Books are purposely everywhere in Oblivion. This serves as a realistic backdrop in a quaint city building, but it's also an incredibly clever way to introduce lore to the player. Instead of shoving these facts down your throat through long-winded cutscenes that take away from your immersive gameplay experience, Bethesda leaves these booklets of knowledge scattered throughout the game, waiting for any curious player who is ready to dive deeper. They even added an incentive to read books, as certain ones would provide an easy skill point. While some players just wanted the experience from these books, others wanted the experience, and Oblivion provided for those players like a mother goat provides its teat. Wait, what? Why would you make that analogy? Stop showing pictures! Keep showing pictures. Let's move on to examine some of the foundational design choices that made Oblivion so exceptional. Even design choices as basic as first-person versus third-person view, or whether or not to include online multiplayer, affect the player's experience of a game. Although Oblivion can be played in third-person, I'd argue the game is meant to be played in first-person. This decision to make Oblivion largely first-person translates to a new level of player engrossment in the game world, and separates Oblivion from the crowd in a genre dominated by a third-person camera. This first-person perspective literally means that you see Cyrodiil through the eyes of your character, and it's easy to see how that translates to a feeling of immersion. Likewise, the fact that Oblivion has zero online or multiplayer components means that your experience as the champion of Cyrodiil is never interrupted with the introduction of real-life elements. In MMORPGs, it's very possible for the engrossing fantasy world to be broken up by less than canon player dialogue. But excluding any kind of online or multiplayer feature means that will never happen in Oblivion. And interestingly, that exclusion actually adds to the game's captivating power. Now, all of these design choices are really cool and clearly level up the sense of immersion you get from playing Oblivion, but it goes much deeper than that. Even things as basic as menu screens pull you into this artificial reality. Menu design seems like a silly afterthought with a world as big and impressive as Oblivion. Shut up, editor of this video! Think about it. In any game, you'll visit a menu or startup screen at least twice to start and end the game. But in a game like Oblivion, with its constant map checking, quest maintenance, and near OCD levels of saving, you see this baby pop up quite a few times in any decent length play session. That has the potential to be extremely jarring and immersion breaking if done incorrectly. But Oblivion shines here. Take a look at this and tell me you don't feel like you're sifting through the Elder Scrolls themselves. This is an area where Oblivion's younger brother didn't do quite as well. Here, I feel like I'm in a medieval fantasy world with magic and elves. Here, I feel like I'm playing a game with a sleek interface. Aesthetically better, perhaps, but definitely not as immersive. If something as seemingly inconsequential as a menu screen adds to immersion, could even the controller scheme make a difference? Yes, idiot! I'm working with goddamn morons. Let's take a look at Oblivion's button layout, specifically the buttons used for combat. Right trigger is attack and left trigger is block. Now let's equip ourselves with a standard sword and shield combo. Yes, right trigger is attack, but it's attacking with your right hand. Left trigger is block, but it's blocking with your left hand. The movements of your character are mirroring your actual physical movements. Now I know this isn't exactly the case if you have no shield or a two-handed weapon, but let's take a look at Skyrim to see where the developers were headed. This is one area where Skyrim brought the player to an even greater level of immersion than in Oblivion. In fact, the instruction manual actually says this. Rather than simply stating attack or magic, the developers deliberately wrote right and left hand for the corresponding trigger. This ingrains the concept that your character's movements are your movements on an even deeper subliminal level. While Oblivion didn't go quite this far, it's clear what Bethesda had in mind. Okay, so I've spent 11 minutes sucking Oblivion's dick, but let's take a moment to STD test that massive cock. How could a game be truly immersive when things like this happen? Or this? Or this? How realistic is a game world when you hear stock line after stock line from passing NPCs, which was so prevalent in the sequel that it evolved into a meme? Just as praising the obvious design choices didn't make sense, as they were largely technological improvements, it's unfair for us to critique these design choices that were held back by obvious technological constraints. In a game as big as Oblivion, glitches are bound to happen. Likewise, the sheer number of player-to-NPC interactions combined with the reality of voiceover costs mean that repeated lines are bound to happen. They are merely technologically and logistically induced smudges on an otherwise masterpiece of a game. So what does this all mean? Not only is Oblivion one of the most immersive games of all time, but that sense of immersion felt by players the world over was caused by very specific and deliberate game design choices by the developers. From the obvious to the extremely subtle, these choices are what made Oblivion so great, despite its flaws. Through an amazing open world overflowing with depth and realism, Oblivion gave us an experience that felt almost as real as life. Because after all, that's what immersion is. Instead of playing as a character in a game, you are the character in this real universe. That's what made it so different, and that's what gave Oblivion a Divergent design.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We're hoping to make this a regular series, so let us know what you liked, let us know what you didn't like in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for future games for us to cover, comments below, do it. And in the meantime, click me for Faith Connors, The Story You Never Knew, and click down below for Gordon Freeman, The Story You Never Knew. Peace.
Dear brother, I do not spread rumors. I create them.